Across the sprawling saga of Middle-earth, from the ancient legends of the First Age to the waning days of the Third, countless tales of heroism and betrayal have enthralled readers for generations. Yet among these stories, one intriguing question has remained largely unexamined. Which of Tolkien's myriad characters possessed the greatest fortune? The obvious candidates present themselves readily. Was it Smaug the Terrible, who for nearly 2 centuries rested upon a treasure hoard vast enough to buy entire realms? Could it have been Thror, the dwarven king under the mountain, whose legendary wealth attracted the dragon's ruinous attention? Perhaps Thorin Oakenshield deserves consideration, having briefly reclaimed Erebor's riches before his untimely fall. Or must we look deeper into Middle-earth's history, to King Thingol with his priceless Silmaril, or the master craftsmen of Khazad-dûm with their seemingly endless veins of mithril? What follows is an investigation into evidence that Middle-earth's greatest wealth was never truly possessed by any one being. Instead, it became an entity unto itself, a malevolent force that ensnared those who believed they could own it. This is the story of how the treasure hoard of Erebor transcended material value to become one of the most cunningly disguised villains in all of Tolkien's works, a truth hidden in plain sight for over 80 years. In the year 2590 of the Third Age, when Thorin's grandfather Thror established the kingdom under the mountain, none could have foreseen the terrible fate that awaited this legendary realm. The initial purpose of Erebor's wealth was profoundly productive. The mountain's natural resources, precious metals, gems, and stone, were extracted not primarily for accumulation, but for transformation. The dwarves of Erebor were, above all, makers. Their craftsmanship converted raw materials into works of extraordinary utility and beauty, weapons of unmatched quality, armor impervious to common blades, tools that would not dull or break, and jewelry that captured light in ways that seemed magical to other races. There was much singing in the mountain in those days. Tolkien tells us in The Hobbit, a simple line that carries profound weight when contrasted with the silence and desolation that would later consume those same halls. This singing signified not just happiness, but the integration of creation with daily life. Dwarves often sang rhythmic work songs that accompanied their crafting, a tradition dating back to Aule, the Vala who created their race and taught them craft. The early wealth of Erebor flowed outward like water from a spring, irrigating the economies of surrounding lands. The city of Dale, built in Erebor's shadow, grew from a small trading post to a prosperous center of commerce, where the works of dwarven hands met the goods of distant lands. Merchants from as far as Dorwinion on the Sea of Rhûn brought their wares to exchange for Erebor's crafts. The men of Dale became middlemen in this commerce, developing specialized skills as translators, assessors, and traders that complemented the dwarves' mastery of making. This symbiotic relationship extended beyond mere trade. When the men of Dale faced hardship, whether from harsh winters, poor harvests, or occasional threats from the east, Erebor's wealth provided a buffer against disaster. Similarly, when the Mountain Kingdom required foods and textiles it could not produce in its stone halls, Dale's merchants ensured these necessities arrived reliably. The Elven King's realm in northern Mirkwood also participated in this network, trading fine wines and forest products for dwarven metalwork that even the elves, with all their skill, could not match in certain respects. For nearly 180 years, this virtuous cycle continued. Erebor stood as a testament to dwarven craftsmanship and prosperity. Its halls gleamed with golden light, reflected from treasures beyond counting, and the skill of its craftspeople drew trade and tribute from lands far and wide. More importantly, the wealth generated by this craft and commerce circulated through the region, enriching not just the Mountain Kingdom, but all who engaged with it. Yet slowly, imperceptibly, something began to change. The shift from wealth as means to wealth as end occurred over generations, making it almost impossible to pinpoint when exactly the corruption began. Some scholars of Middle-earth might trace it to the discovery of the Arkenstone, the king's jewel, deep within the mountain during Thror's reign. This extraordinary gem shone with an inner light that captivated all who beheld it. It was like a globe with 1,000 facets. It shone like silver in the firelight, like water in the sun, like snow under the stars, like rain upon the moon. Thror took this gem as a sign of divine right, proclaiming it the heart of the mountain and the symbol of his house's authority to rule. But this act may have been the first seed of corruption, the beginning of wealth as an identity rather than a tool. The Arkenstone was not crafted by dwarven hands, but found. It represented not the productive transformation of resources, but the jealous possession of a unique treasure. The signs of this shift manifested gradually in the changing patterns of Erebor's economy. Initially, the treasuries of the mountain had been primarily storehouses of materials awaiting transformation or distribution. But over time, more and more wealth began to remain in its raw state. Coined gold and unworked gems accumulated in deeper chambers, removed from the cycle of creation and exchange. This transformation accelerated as Thror aged. The king, who had once been known for his generosity and vision, became increasingly suspicious of outsiders and protective of his wealth. Trade terms with Dale and distant realms became less favorable. Taxes and tolls increased. Where once wealth had flowed freely in and out of the mountain, now it just stays in. The people of Dale noticed this change first, as their prosperity began to falter despite the mountain's seemingly endless riches. The elves of Mirkwood, with their longer perspective, saw the pattern clearly, but viewed it as merely another turn in the sad history of dwarven greed. Neither foresaw the catastrophe that such accumulation would inevitably attract. In Tolkien's Middle-earth, such accumulation never goes unpunished. By the year 2770 of the Third Age, tales of Erebor's magnificence had spread far beyond the lands of men and dwarves. They reached the ears of Smaug, greatest and chiefest of calamities, a fire drake from the north, drawn inexorably to the scent of treasure. The dragon's devastating attack was not merely a natural disaster, but a moral reckoning. Wealth hoarded will always attract destruction. Within a single day, both Erebor and Dale were laid waste. Those who survived fled with only what they could carry, a bitter irony for a people who had accumulated more than any other in the north. The fall of Erebor transformed the dwarf lords into wandering exiles, none more deeply marked by this reversal than Thror himself. Even dispossessed of his kingdom, the former king could not relinquish his attachment to gold. In the year 2790, this obsession led him to enter Moria alone in search of its legendary wealth, despite knowing the dangers that lurked within. His death at the hands of Azog the Defiler precipitated the war of dwarves and orcs, a bloody conflict that decimated both sides and claimed thousands of lives. For Thorin Oakenshield, who had witnessed both Erebor's glory and its fiery downfall, the mountain's treasure represented something more complex than mere riches. It embodied identity, legacy, and birthright. His quest to reclaim Erebor, ostensibly a noble endeavor to restore his people's homeland, carried within it the seeds of the same corruption that had afflicted his grandfather. What makes this tragedy so poignant is that the treasure's corrupting influence worked its malevolence even in absence. For over a century, while Smaug slumbered atop his ill-gotten hoard, the mere memory of Erebor's wealth twisted the hearts and minds of Durin's heirs. The dwarves, who had once been makers and craftsmen, became consumed with thoughts of reclamation and revenge. Their skill and industry, once directed toward creation, now focused singularly on restoration of what was lost. This reveals a critical truth about the treasure of Erebor. Its power to corrupt lies not in its use, but in its mere existence. It wrought destruction when amassed by Thror, when guarded by Smaug, and when reclaimed by Thorin. At each stage, the identity of its owner changed, but its malevolent influence remained constant. The gold itself was the only true constant, the only real possessor in this dark equation of ownership. In the year 2770 of the Third Age, a shadow fell upon the kingdom under the mountain. Smaug the Golden, greatest of the dragons of his day, descended upon Erebor with fire and ruin. His attack is recorded in the histories as merely another tragedy in Middle-earth's long chronicle of woe, a terrible beast drawn by instinctive greed to the gleaming horde of Durin's folk. Yet something curious happened after the initial slaughter and destruction. Something that challenges our understanding of who truly ruled the Lonely Mountain for the next 171 years. My armor is like tenfold shields, my teeth are swords, my claws spears, the shock of my tail a thunderbolt, my wings a hurricane, and my breath death. So boasted Smaug to Bilbo, and indeed, the dragon's power was unmatched in the Third Age. With such might at his disposal, the strength to topple kingdoms and lay waste to armies, what did this chiefest and greatest of calamities do after seizing Erebor's incalculable wealth? Nothing. For nearly 2 centuries, Smaug never ventured beyond the mountain. This apex predator, this force of nature capable of bringing ruin to all the northern lands, simply stopped. He sprawled atop his stolen hoard, knowing it to an ounce, yet never spending a single coin, never crafting a single item, never using this wealth in any way beyond making it his bed. The treasure, the accumulated masterworks of generations of dwarven craftsmen with the legendary Arkenstone at its center, had effectively imprisoned its supposed owner. When we look carefully at Tolkien's description of dragons and their relationship with treasure, a disturbing pattern emerges. Dragons steal gold and jewels, you know, from men and elves and dwarves wherever they can find them, and they guard their plunder as long as they live. This is not the behavior of a conqueror who has claimed spoils, but of a servant who has been given a task. Smaug did not possess the treasure of Erebor, he guarded it. The true nature of this relationship was revealed most clearly after Smaug's death. When Bard's Black Arrow found its mark in November 2941, something remarkable happened. Though the dragon died, the treasure's influence lived on undiminished. The vast, unguarded hoard immediately kindled avarice in the hearts of men, elves, and dwarves alike, leading to the tense standoff that preceded the Battle of 5 Armies. Most telling was the transformation of Thorin Oakenshield. Upon reclaiming his grandfather's hoard, this noble heir of Durin, who had endured decades of exile and hardship with dignity, descended into paranoia and irrational hatred. The price of the goods and the assistance that we received of the Lake Men we will fairly pay in due time, but nothing will we give, not even a loaf's worth, under threat of force. The so-called dragon sickness that afflicted Thorin suggests something profound about Smaug's role. The dragon was not the source of corruption, but merely its vessel. Another victim of the treasure's dark influence, albeit one uniquely suited to serve as its guardian due to draconic nature and power. What makes Smaug's case so striking becomes clear when we consider other dragons in Tolkien's legendarium. Glaurung, father of dragons, rampaged across Beleriand during the First Age, actively fulfilling Morgoth's commands. Anchor-Lagan, the Black's destruction was so vast it broke the towers of Thangorodrim when he fell. These dragons were not merely hoarders, but agents of their master's will, wreaking havoc across vast territories. Even lesser dragons of the Third Age occasionally ventured from their lairs to terrorize surrounding lands. Yet Smaug, after his initial devastating attack, never again left Erebor during his long occupation. This uncharacteristic restraint suggests an unusual bond between dragon and horde, as if the treasure itself had tethered him to the mountain halls. To understand the unique malevolence of Erebor's treasure, we must examine how it fits within the broader patterns of wealth's influence throughout Middle-earth's history. The First Age witnessed the tragedy of the Silmarils. Created by the Noldorin elf lord Feanor, these three perfect jewels contained the mingled light of the two trees of Valinor. Yet their very perfection inspired possessiveness so intense it transcended rational thought. Feanor himself grew increasingly suspicious and jealous of his creations, refusing the Vala's request to break them to restore the dying trees. When Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, stole the Silmarils and fled to Middle-earth, Feanor led his sons in swearing their terrible oath. They swore an oath which none shall break and none should take, by the name even of Ilúvatar, calling the everlasting dark upon them if they kept it not. And Manwë they named in witness, and Vardar, and the hallowed mountain of Tanicatil, vowing to pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world Vala, demon, elf or man, as yet unborn, or any creature, great or small, good or evil, that time should bring forth unto the end of days, whoso should hold or take or keep a Silmaril from their possession. This oath led directly to the first kinslaying at Alqualondë, where elf slew elf for the first time in history. Throughout the long wars of Beleriand, the pursuit of the Silmarils brought only further tragedy, culminating in the destruction of entire kingdoms. Even when the jewels were finally recovered, they remained forever beyond the reach of those who had sworn to claim them. The Silmarils demonstrated how even the most beautiful and sacred treasures could inspire destructive obsession, but their influence remained limited to the fate of specific bloodlines and kingdoms. In the Second Age, the discovery of Mithril beneath the Misty Mountains offered another example. So valuable was this silver metal that Tolkien wrote it was worth 10 times its weight in gold, and in later days its worth was beyond price. For thousands of years, the dwarves of Khazad-dûm mined ever deeper in pursuit of this wealth. While initially bringing prosperity to Durin's folk, their unceasing excavations eventually delved too greedily and too deep, as Gandalf would later recount. Their picks awakened a Balrog of Morgoth that forced the dwarves to abandon their greatest kingdom, transforming it into the Black Pit of Moria. Here, wealth's corruption manifested not through a single object of desire, but through the never-ending pursuit of more, an insatiable hunger that drove an entire civilization to dig its own doom. The 7 rings given to the dwarf lords by Sauron in the Second Age represent another evolution in the pattern. These were treasures explicitly created to corrupt, objects with an intentional dark purpose. Yet even here, the effect was not what their creator intended. As Tolkien tells us, the rings inflamed their hearts with a greed of gold and precious things, so that if they lacked them all, other good things seemed profitless. Rather than subjugating the dwarves to Sauron's will, as happened with men, the rings merely amplified an existing vulnerability. Their influence, while significant, remained reactive rather than proactive. What distinguishes Erebor's treasure from these earlier examples is the scale of its influence. The Silmarils affected primarily the House of Feanor, Mithril the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, and the 7 rings their dwarf lord-bearers. But the gold of Erebor corrupted across racial boundaries. Dwarves, men, elves, and even a dragon all fell under its sway simultaneously. Most remarkable was the treasure's almost sentient ability to adapt its lure to the desires of each race. For dwarves, it represented heritage and birthright. For men, security and prosperity. For elves, beauty and craftsmanship. And for Smaug, dominance and power. This universality of corruption suggests something unprecedented in Middle-earth's history. Consider what happened after Smaug's death. With no single being claiming ownership, the treasure itself seemed to orchestrate events to maximize conflict. Thorin's transformation from noble heir to paranoid king occurred precisely when he should have been most relieved and generous in victory. The men of Laketown, the elves of Mirkwood, and the dwarves of the Iron Hills, 3 races with little history of direct conflict, suddenly found themselves on the brink of war over shares of a treasure none of them had created. The parallel to the One Ring is impossible to ignore. Though never explicitly stated by Tolkien, the treasure of Erebor demonstrates many qualities similar to Sauron's creation. It inspires obsession, warps rational thinking, and magnifies the worst qualities in its possessors. Like the ring, it seems to have a preservation instinct, drawing protectors to itself when threatened and fostering conflict that ensures its continued existence. Having examined the evidence across Middle-earth's history, we must now consider the deeper meaning behind these patterns. What was Tolkien himself saying through these recurring tales of wealth and corruption? As a devout Catholic, Tolkien viewed material wealth not as inherently evil, but as a profound moral test, one that few characters in his legendarium pass unscathed. The teachings of his faith emphasize the dangers of attachment to worldly treasures, a theme that resonates throughout Scripture. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? This biblical warning finds itself across the ages of Middle-earth. Perhaps nowhere is this philosophy more explicitly articulated than in Gandalf's counsel throughout The Hobbit. When the company reaches the outskirts of Mirkwood, the wizard offers a parting warning that serves as both plot foreshadowing and moral lesson, stating the dragon has long been accustomed to live on the treasures of the mountain. He will guard his plunder as long as he lives and never enjoy a brass ring of it. This observation highlights a paradox at the heart of Tolkien's moral framework. Those who possess wealth but cannot use it for good, share it, or find joy in it have become possessed by their possessions. Smaug's wealth is meaningless. He neither crafts with it, trades with it, nor improves the world through it. His treasure exists only as a bed upon which the dragon's corruption festers. The contrast between cultures provides perhaps the clearest window into this philosophy. The elves, particularly the Noldor, represent the most balanced approach to riches. Their immense skill in craftsmanship is directed toward beauty rather than accumulation. Even Feanor's obsession with the Silmarils, perhaps the most valuable treasures in all of Middle-earth's history, began not as greed, but as a desire to capture light and beauty. It was only when possessiveness overtook craftsmanship that tragedy followed. In stark contrast stand the dwarves, whose complex relationship with wealth forms a central theme in their racial history. While their craftsmanship rivals the elves in skill, their love of treasure, particularly gold, repeatedly proves their undoing. The 7 rings given to the dwarf lords did not bend them to Sauron's will as happened with men, but instead inflamed their hearts with a greed of gold and precious things, so that if they lacked them all, other good things seemed profitless. The men of Middle-earth demonstrate perhaps the greatest range in their relationship to wealth. From the noble but doomed Númenóreans, whose prosperity became pride, to the simple folk of Bree who valued comfort over riches, men embody the full spectrum of responses to material abundance. Most telling is the contrast between Gondor and Rohan in the Third Age. Gondor's ancient wealth and sprawling markets versus the Rohirrim's simple economy based on horses and honor. Through these varying human societies, Tolkien explores how wealth can either elevate or diminish the human spirit. Finally, there are the hobbits, who perhaps come closest to Tolkien's ideal. Their modest prosperity brings comfort without excess, luxury without obsession. When Bilbo returns from his adventure, his newfound wealth is used primarily for gifts and good food, rather than power or influence. Even Lobelia Sackville-Baggins' grasping materialism is portrayed as laughable rather than truly evil. Through these contrasts, Tolkien communicates a consistent message. Wealth that serves life, community, and beauty can be good, while wealth that becomes an end in itself inevitably corrupts. The treasure of Erebor represents the most extreme expression of wealth that has forgotten its purpose, becoming not a tool for creation and community, but a force for corruption and conflict.